My name is Alden Rourke, and I am an employee of the traveling troupe known as Langstrom and Vale's Grand Nocturne Circus, a job title I introduce with the same stiff formality I use whenever investigators, insurance agents, or frightened parents ask what exactly I do here. The truth is simple but never comforting. I maintain the grounds, the tents, the equipment, and, on certain nights like tonight, the rules. There are only 3 rules, and every performer, from tightrope walker to ticket seller, knows them by heart. I knew them by heart long before I signed the contract. Yet this morning, at the beginning of what I thought would be an ordinary show day, those 3 rules started failing in ways I cannot explain. That, I think, is where this all truly began. I woke before dawn in my bunk behind the main tent, the diesel generators rumbling like restless animals. The circus was camped in a windswept clearing outside a tiny town most maps don't bother naming. The kind of place where locals glance at you through blinds but never come close. I'd been with this circus for 7 months, long enough to recognize when the air felt different. Today it felt wrong, heavy, charged, like static crawling along the underside of my skin. I swung my legs over the side of the bunk and reached for my boots, noticing a faint tremor in my fingertips. Not nerves, instinct. Outside, fog clung low to the ground, swirling between the big top poles like pale fingers. The red and black canvas of the main tent rose above me, rippling with the cold wind. Most days, the place would feel almost inviting, like a monument built out of worn fabric and stubborn tradition. But today it loomed, and the rules, the ones drilled into every worker during orientation, drifted through my mind the way they always did when something was about to go wrong. Rule 1. Never enter the Hall of Mirrors before 7 p.m. Rule 2. Never answer anyone calling your name from outside the tent after sunset. Rule 3. If you see the ringmaster's silhouette in more than one place at the same time, evacuate immediately. They sound dramatic, I know, but this circus has a long memory, carved into its beams and buried beneath every tent stake. The veterans teach the newcomers, and the newcomers learn fast, because ignoring any of these rules has ended in injury, disappearance, or worse. I've helped search for people who ignored Rule 1. We never found them. I've heard voices violating Rule 2, mimicking familiar tones with uncanny accuracy. And Rule 3, well, I've only seen it once, and that single glimpse was enough to keep me obedient ever since. When I made my way toward the supply tent that morning, I noticed Marla, our tightrope walker, standing perfectly still near the midway, head tilted like she was listening to something. She didn't look at me until I was right beside her. Her eyes had the glassy look of someone waking from a dream. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "No," I said. "Hear what?" She shook her head once, sharply, and brushed past me without another word. Not unusual. Circus performers are moody, exhausted, or dramatic depending on the day, but something about the tension in her jaw unsettled me. She wasn't spooked. She was confused. I continued my morning rounds, checking ropes, tightening stakes, inspecting the safety rails, doing all the things no audience ever realizes someone must do. Our ringmaster, Dr. Silas Vale, oversaw everything with meticulous obsession. He believed a circus lived or died by its order, and he trusted me to uphold that order behind the scenes. But when I reached the equipment shed, I saw the padlock hanging open. That alone was enough to make my stomach twist. We never leave locks open, not even for a minute, not after what happened in Denver. I pushed the door open cautiously, half expecting to see a raccoon rifling through the rigging. Instead, I froze. Every mirror from the Hall of Mirrors, at least a dozen of them, had been moved into the shed. They leaned against crates, leaned against each other, reflecting pale distortions of the dusty light filtering through the canvas roof. The Hall of Mirrors is padlocked in the mornings. No one is supposed to touch the mirrors without the ringmaster's permission, especially before 7 p.m. Rule 1 isn't symbolic. It's protection. I stepped backward without even realizing it. A faint chill pressed against my spine as if the air behind me had dropped 10 degrees. The mirrors were facing inward, arranged in a crooked semicircle, almost like someone had been standing inside them. I didn't call for help. I should have. Instead, I did what years of training and instinct demanded. I shut the shed door, snapped the padlock back in place, and took 3 steady breaths. Then I walked directly to the ringmaster's wagon. Dr. Vale answered the knock instantly, as if he'd been waiting on the other side. He always wore a pristine burgundy coat, spotless despite the mud everywhere else in camp. His expression rarely changed, but when he looked at me this time, something flickered behind his eyes, something like anticipation. "Alden," he said, voice smooth as polished wood. "Is there a problem?" I told him about the mirrors. I expected anger, panic, at least concern. Instead, he smiled like I'd said something mildly amusing. "Good," he replied. "Good," I repeated, stunned. "They shouldn't be out. It's before 7. A deviation from routine does not break the rules," he said calmly. "Not necessarily." I felt a pulse of unease ripple up my throat. But they were arranged. Someone was inside them. His smile widened, too slow, too patient. "Yes," he said. "I believe today will be significant." When he closed the wagon door, leaving me alone in the cold morning light, I stood motionless for several seconds. The fog seemed thicker now, creeping between the tents like it had purpose. And though no one had said it aloud, every bone in my body understood something with absolute certainty. Today, all 3 rules were going to be tested, and we were not prepared. I left the ringmaster's wagon with a tightness in my chest that felt like a fist closing around my ribs. The morning fog was thinning now, but not in the normal, sun-bled way. It peeled back in long streaks, dragging itself toward the main tent as if pulled by some unseen current. The circus was beginning to wake. Performers stretched near the caravans, vendors prepped their carts, and the electricians climbed the metal scaffolds that rattled whenever the wind shifted. Yet underneath the hum of routine ran something else. Something brittle, like tension built into the bones of the place. I tried to focus on my tasks. A job unfinished gets you noticed here, and being noticed on a day like this was the last thing I wanted. I replaced fraying rope on the trapeze rig, double-checked the emergency ladders, resecured the tiger enclosure gate, all while trying and failing not to think about the ringmaster's reaction. "Good," he'd said, "about the mirrors, about Rule 1 nearly breaking itself, about something arranging them." By the time I reached the back corridor of the main tent, the air smelled like sawdust, cold metal, and the faint sweetness of cotton candy machines warming up. I heard voices ahead, Marla's again, along with the deep rumble of Jonas, our animal wrangler. I slowed when I saw them. They stood just outside the dressing area, facing a prop cart that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't the cart itself that stopped me. It was what lay on top of it. Top hat, burgundy, identical to the one Dr. Vale wore. Jonas was pale beneath his beard, and Marla stood several feet back, arms wrapped around herself. "Did someone misplace this?" she asked without looking at me. "No," Jonas said immediately. "That one wasn't here 20 minutes ago. I was cleaning this aisle." I stepped closer cautiously. The hat had a thin line of dust around its base, as if something had set it down deliberately. But it was the position of it that made my pulse start pounding. The hat was angled toward the curtain leading to the Hall of Mirrors. If the ringmaster was playing some kind of game, it wasn't funny. And if the hat wasn't his, Jonas suddenly tensed. "Don't touch it," he said. "I wasn't going to." "Good." Because something walked past the animal cages earlier. Didn't see it, just the way the lions reacted. He swallowed hard, rubbing the back of his neck. "They never react unless it's him," Marla whispered. But he was still in his wagon. We all knew who she meant. The ringmaster rarely left his wagon before noon, and as far as anyone saw today, he hadn't. "Let's move the cart outside," Jonas said, trying to steady his voice. "Get the path clear for the acrobats." He reached for the cart's handle, and just as he started to pull, the curtain behind us fluttered. Not from wind, but like something was brushing past it from the other side. Marla flinched. Jonas froze, and I felt that crawling sensation at the base of my skull, the one I only feel when a rule is about to be broken. Rule 1. Never enter the Hall of Mirrors before 7 p.m. None of us had gone inside. but something inside had come close enough to touch the curtain. I leaned slowly and peered through the gap. The hallway beyond was dim, the mirrors at the far end reflecting slivers of light like fractured ice. Nothing moved, but in the reflection of a mirror on the left-hand wall, I saw something that didn't match the hallway's layout. A silhouette, standing straight, motionless, hat brim slanted, facing me. I jerked back and nearly collided with Jonas. "What?" he demanded. "Someone's in there." Jonas swore under his breath. Marla's voice cracked. "It's barely noon. That's not. There's no reason." I shook my head. "Not someone. Something. And the ringmaster told me the mirrors being moved was good." Jonas didn't need convincing. He grabbed Marla's wrist and pulled her away from the curtain. "We're getting out of this aisle. Right now." We backed away together, not turning around until we were well into the main tent's central space. Performers moved around us without noticing our panic. They rehearsed routines, rolled barrels, adjusted lighting cables. The normalcy made the dread worse, like we were the only ones seeing the warning signs. Jonas finally exhaled, breath shaking. "I'll lock down the animal tent. If something's wandering, I'm not letting it near the cages." He left quickly, boots crunching on stray gravel. Marla stayed beside me, hugging her elbows. "Alden, did he tell you anything else? The ringmaster? You saw him earlier." I hesitated. Telling her the truth would make things worse, but lying wouldn't help either. "He wasn't surprised about the mirrors." Her eyes widened. "Is that supposed to reassure me?" "No," I admitted. "It's not." A burst of laughter echoed from across the tent. Performers rehearsing jokes, practicing clown routines, brushing off their pre-show nerves. It almost felt normal, until a small girl darted between two crates and ran directly into Marla. The girl gasped and stumbled backward. Marla steadied her. "Easy there. Where are your parents?" The girl stared up at us with wide, glassy eyes. Too glassy, almost like she wasn't focusing on anything at all. I crouched a little. "Are you lost?" She didn't blink. Her voice came out soft, monotone, as if reciting something she'd been told to memorize. "He said I should give you a message." A cold shiver crept up my spine. "Who said?" "The man in the red coat," she whispered. Marla's breath hitched. My mouth felt dry. "What message?" The girl lifted her hand and pointed toward the hall of mirrors. "He said you're late." Marla grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug through my sleeve. And the girl, without another word, turned sharply and began walking away. Not running, not searching for her parents, just walking, straight toward the exit flap, posture too stiff, movements too smooth. "Marla?" I whispered, voice trembling despite myself. The ringmaster was in his wagon. I saw him. I talked to him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Rule 3. If you see the ringmaster's silhouette in more than one place at the same time, evacuate immediately. But evacuation wasn't an option yet. Show day protocols kept us anchored until the final equipment checks were done, and I could already tell the rest of the troupe hadn't noticed anything wrong. We were alone with this, alone with him, and the day had only just begun. Marla and I stood frozen long after the little girl disappeared through the tent flap, as if moving might confirm what we both already feared. I kept replaying her voice in my head. Flat, rehearsed, almost hollow, and the way she said I was late. Late for what? The circus ran on strict schedules, and the ringmaster never tolerated deviations. But the tone she used wasn't his tone. It felt borrowed, like something repeating the rhythm of a voice it didn't fully understand. "We need to find Jonas," Marla finally whispered. She sounded like she was forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "If he's locking down the animals, he should know what we just saw." I nodded, swallowing hard. The main tent was alive with activity now. The aerialists practicing spins, the jugglers working with weighted pins instead of lit torches, the clowns painting their faces in the corner. None of them had noticed the girl. None felt the shift in the air. It made me realize how subtle the wrongness had become, like a scent you only catch when you stop breathing. We hurried across the tent, weaving between crates and equipment carts, toward the back pathways that led to the animal enclosures. The ground felt softer underfoot than it should have been, almost like the earth itself had loosened, like the soil didn't want to hold our weight. Every few steps I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a red coat slipping behind a pole or a silhouette appearing where it shouldn't. Rule 3 wasn't something you waited to verify. If you saw it, it was already too late. When we reached the animal tent, Jonas was standing outside with his hands gripping the metal latch so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked up at us, face contorted with confusion and fear. "You two need to see this," he said quietly. The way he spoke made my skin prickle. Jonas wasn't the type to scare easily. He'd spent 30 years working with animals that could tear a man apart. If something had shaken him, it meant something was deeply, horribly wrong. We stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Damp straw, cold iron, and something faintly metallic, like the air after a thunderstrike. The lions were pressed against the far side of their cage, not roaring but trembling, their tails tucked low. The Bengal tiger paced relentlessly, its movements jerky, agitated, ears pinned back. Even the llamas, usually oblivious to anything that wasn't food, stood rigid. But all of that was secondary. The real problem stood near the center of the tent. At first I thought it was Jonas's spare mannequin, the ones we use to teach performers how to fall safely from heights. But mannequins don't breathe, and they don't turn their heads slowly, like they're only just hearing movement around them. The figure wore a circus coat, burgundy, matching the ringmaster's. The collar was the same, the hemline the same, the fit nearly identical. But there was no face, not hidden, absent. Skin stretched blank from chin to brow like a smooth sheet of wax. Marla gasped and clutched my shirt. Jonas took 2 steps backward, jaw tensing. "It wasn't here," Jonas murmured. "I swear on my life, Alden. It wasn't here when I locked the cages. It was just standing there when I turned around. And it's breathing." It was, slowly, like something trying to mimic the rhythm of lungs but not quite getting it right. Then, as if recognizing our presence fully for the first time, the figure lifted its arm with a stiff, unnatural movement and pointed directly at Jonas. Marla yanked him backward. "Don't move!" But the tent lights flickered before she could finish. Once, twice, the shadows warped across the fabric walls, stretching long and thin, bending in ways that shadows shouldn't bend. When the lights steadied again, the figure had moved, not walked, just relocated, now standing inches behind the tiger cage. The tiger pressed itself flat against the bars opposite it, pupils blown wide with terror. Jonas swore loudly and grabbed a length of chain from the wall. "It's messing with them. Whatever it is, it's driving them insane. We have to get out of here," I said, keeping my eyes locked on the faceless figure. "Jonas, leave it. Come now." He hesitated only a second before retreating toward us, chain still clutched in his hand like a talisman. We didn't take our eyes off the thing. Not for a heartbeat. Not even as we backed out of the tent. When the flap fell closed behind us, Jonas exhaled shakily. "This is Rule 3 territory. You know that. If it's wearing his coat, if it's walking inside camp, this place isn't safe. We have to tell the others." Charging into the main tent shouting warnings would do nothing. The circus had protocols for danger. Storms, generator failure, escaped animals. But not this. Not the ringmaster's double. Not the one thing that every veteran whispered about but never described in detail. "First we need to confirm where the real ringmaster is," I said, though my stomach twisted even suggesting it. "If he's still in his wagon, we need to see it with our own eyes." Marla's voice cracked. "But what if the one in the wagon isn't him?" For a moment, none of us spoke. The wind pushed the fog around our ankles, swirling in weak spirals. The sound of rehearsals echoed faintly from the main tent, normal noises made sinister by contrast. Jonas rubbed a shaking hand over his beard. "All right," he said, "but we go together." We approached the ringmaster's wagon cautiously, each of us scanning the shadows, half expecting that faceless figure to step into view again. The wooden steps creaked under our feet. Jonas lifted his hand to knock. but he never touched the door, because from behind it came a sound. A voice. Dr. Vale's voice. Calm, slow, unmistakable. But he wasn't speaking to us. He was speaking to someone else. "No, not yet," his voice murmured. "They're not ready. They still think they understand the rules." Marla went pale. Jonas mouthed, "Who is he talking to?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. My hands had gone cold enough to ache. Then the voice continued, soft and chilling. "Bring him to me." Jonas stumbled backward. "He's talking about someone," but I already knew. The air behind us shifted. Not a footstep, not a breath, just presence. Slowly, too slowly, I turned my head. The faceless figure stood at the bottom of the wagon steps, pointing at me, and the ringmaster's voice, muffled through the wood, spoke again. "Alden is late." For a few seconds, none of us breathed. The faceless figure stood so close its coat almost brushed Jonas's leg. Its hand, long, bony, too still, remained fixed on me, arm locked in a rigid angle like it didn't fully understand how joints were supposed to work. The air around it felt wrong, distorted, as if every sound in the clearing had been dragged away and replaced with a thick, humming pressure deep in my ears. Jonas reacted first. He grabbed my collar and yanked me backward off the steps. I stumbled, nearly falling, but he held firm. Marla backed up with us, her breath shaky and uneven. Inside the wagon, the ringmaster's voice grew closer. Footsteps moved toward the door, slow, deliberate, not hurried, not surprised, almost rehearsed. Jonas hissed, "Alden, move!" We ran. Not far, because there was nowhere far in a circus camp you could run without being seen or running into equipment, but enough to put distance between us and both the wagon and the faceless mimic standing guard at its base. When we rounded a row of caravans, Jonas pressed us behind a stack of prop crates. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs might snap. Marla leaned against a crate, clutching her stomach like she might be sick. "Why is it after you? What does it want?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. But I could still hear the ringmaster's voice echoing in my skull. "Bring him to me." That wasn't how Dr. Vale spoke. He gave orders, yes, but never like that, never with that cold, patient certainty. Jonas peeked around the crates. The faceless figure was still standing there, arm outstretched, unmoving. The wagon door hadn't opened yet. That somehow made it worse. "What do we do?" Marla whispered. "We can't go to the tent. People will panic. And if that thing starts moving around performers..." Jonas cut her off. "We need to break the rules." I stared at him. "What?" "The ringmaster doesn't want us using the emergency perimeter horn unless there's a catastrophic threat," he said. "Guess what? This qualifies." The emergency horn wasn't used lightly. It was a steel cylinder mounted on a pole near the fire equipment, and activating it would shut down rehearsals instantly. Performers would evacuate to the far perimeter of camp, and the generators would shut off within seconds. Only 3 people had authority to use it: the ringmaster, the safety chief, and me. But using it with the ringmaster alive and present, that was a firing offense. A life-ruining offense. Marla grabbed my wrist. "Alden, if he's in that wagon talking to something that isn't human, if something outside is wearing his coat and pointing at you, you need to make that call." I swallowed hard, throat tight. They were right, but even knowing that didn't make walking toward the horn any easier. The horn stood in an open clearing, a metal post rising from the ground like a warning sign. Anyone looking would see us, including that faceless thing. I glanced around again. Shadows crawled under the tents like spilled ink. The fog that had drifted earlier now pooled along the ground, thick and unmoving. And somewhere behind us, I heard a faint echo, footsteps soft as dust shifting. Jonas nudged me forward. "I'll distract it if I have to. Just go." I moved toward the pole, hands trembling. The horn activation box sat waist-high, sealed behind a metal cover. Inside was a single lever with a plastic pull seal that would snap when used. I lifted the cover, but before I could touch the lever, a child's voice spoke directly behind me. "You can't do that." I spun. The same pale little girl from earlier stood an arm's length away, chin tilted up, expression blank. She hadn't approached. She hadn't run. She was just there, like the air folded and let her out. "How did you get here?" I asked quietly. She blinked once, slow, too slow. "He says the show has to go on." My stomach dropped. "Who?" The girl pointed back toward the main tent. "The man in the red coat." Jonas and Marla had caught up behind me. Marla stifled a cry. Jonas stepped in front of the girl, voice hard. "Kid, you need to get away from here." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on me, unblinking, still. Then her expression changed. Not naturally, like a curtain lifting. Her smile was wrong, stretching just a fraction wider than a real child's smile should. Then she leaned forward and whispered, "He says not to pull the lever. He says if you do, you'll see something you weren't supposed to." A chill rolled through me so violently my teeth ached. Marla stepped back. "Alden, she's not a child." Jonas muttered, "She's a puppet." The girl straightened, smile fading back to neutrality. She turned slowly, mechanically, and began to walk away, heading straight toward the big top entrance. I didn't let her get more than 5 steps before snapping the plastic seal and yanking the lever down. The horn erupted with a deafening blast, a metallic, warbling shriek that tore through the entire camp. Performers dropped equipment. Animals roared and thrashed in their cages. The entire circus froze mid-motion, heads snapping toward the emergency post. The girl didn't flinch, but the fog did. It recoiled, like something unseen was hiding inside it and had just been burned. Jonas grabbed my arm. "Move! We need to get to the perimeter before everything shuts down." But before we could take a single step, the generators cut. All at once, the lights died. The music stopped. The camp fell into a suffocating silence so instant and so deep it felt alive. A new sound rose in that dark. A voice carried through the empty air, amplified somehow by the dead stillness. The ringmaster, except it wasn't coming from his wagon. It was coming from everywhere at once. Slow, calm, echoing like it was being spoken through 100 mouths. "Alden." Marla grabbed my hand. Jonas whispered, "Don't look behind you." But the problem was I didn't need to, because whatever was calling my name was getting closer, and closer, and closer. A soft scrape against the dirt just inches behind my heel. Then, 2 voices in perfect unison whispered, "You're late." I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My muscles locked the moment those 2 voices, identical, perfectly layered, breathed those words against the back of my neck. Every instinct I had screamed that turning around meant dying, or disappearing, or worse. Jonas's grip on my shoulder tightened until it hurt. Marla's breath hitched like she was trying not to sob. The entire circus camp was silent except for the faint tremor of fog shifting, as though the ground itself was breathing. Jonas exhaled slowly through his teeth. "Alden, move on my mark." I nodded once, barely. 1. Something behind me dragged the toe of a shoe across the dirt. Not a random movement, deliberate, slow, almost taunting. My heartbeat roared in my ears like a drum being struck too hard. 2. Marla mouthed a prayer I couldn't hear. The air behind me changed, pressure tightening, the kind of shift you feel when someone leans in too close. Whatever was back there was inches from touching me. 3. Run. We bolted. My boots dug into the dirt as I sprinted blindly toward the edge of camp, the horn still ringing in my bones even though it had gone silent seconds ago. The world around us blurred. Tents, wagons, crates streaking past as our bodies reacted faster than our thoughts. I didn't dare glance behind me, but I felt it. A presence moving with us, too smooth to be human, too steady to be running. Marla tripped on a coil of rope. I grabbed her arm before she hit the ground. Jonas was a few steps ahead, waving us forward. "This way," he yelled, but the sound of his voice was swallowed almost instantly by a deep, rhythmic thudding, like heavy footsteps that didn't match his stride. They came from behind us, then beside us, then a flash of red moved in my peripheral vision. Marla screamed, "Left! Left!" We veered sharply, barely avoiding a tall figure emerging from between 2 caravans. The fog wrapped around it like cloth pulled by unseen hands. It didn't chase us. It didn't need to. It was placing itself ahead of us like it knew exactly where we would run. "That's impossible," Jonas gasped. "How is it? How is it doing that?" We cleared the caravans and burst into the wide, open perimeter where performers were gathering in confusion. The emergency protocols had worked. Everyone who wasn't involved in equipment or animal care had evacuated here. Nearly 50 people stood in clumps, murmuring nervously, trying to figure out what was happening. Their faces turned toward us the moment we arrived. Marla stumbled forward, shouting, "Stay together! Nobody go anywhere alone!" But then he stepped out, Dr. Silas Vale, or at least someone wearing him. The ringmaster walked through the center of the crowd with unsettling calm, hands clasped behind his back, posture perfect. His red coat swayed as if moved by a wind that didn't reach the rest of us. People parted instinctively, uncertain, startled by the presence of their employer during an emergency. He smiled, and every muscle in my body went cold, because the smile wasn't his. It stretched too slowly, too wide, revealing teeth just a little too uniform. The real ringmaster smiles were thin, sharp, controlled. This one was a mask trying to imitate him. Marla grabbed my wrist. "Alden," she whispered. "That's not him. That's not him." Jonas stepped between us and the ringmaster-shaped thing. "Where's the real one?" he asked, voice rough. The creature tilted its head, regarding Jonas with a blank, curious stare. Then it lifted its hand and pointed, straight at me. A performer in the crowd laughed nervously. "What's going on? Is this part of a rehearsal?" Jonas barked. "Nobody move! Something's wrong with—" But he didn't get to finish, because another voice spoke, clear, calm, identical, and coming from behind us. I turned despite myself. The real Dr. Vale, coat pristine, eyes sharp, expression composed, walked through the fog toward the perimeter, emerging from the gloom like an actor taking the stage. And for a moment the world seemed to freeze. Two ringmasters, one smiling too wide, one not smiling at all. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The younger performers looked confused. The older ones, those who had been with the circus for years, stumbled backward, faces draining of color. One of them whispered, "Rule 3. Another, "Oh God, oh God." The real ringmaster didn't look at anyone but me. "Alden," he said softly, "come here." I didn't move. The imitation ringmaster stepped closer. "Alden," it echoed in the same tone, same cadence. The voices overlapped until I couldn't tell them apart. Marla grabbed my shoulders. "Don't go to either of them." Jonas braced himself like he expected both to attack at once. "This is why the rules exist," he muttered. "This is it." The real ringmaster, if he was real, took one step forward. The imitation took the same step at the exact same time. Their movements were synchronized. Too synchronized. The crowd began to panic. People backed away. A few ran. A juggler tripped over a crate and fell hard, scrambling to his feet. One of the acrobats shouted for everyone to keep calm, but her voice broke halfway through. And then the imitation turned to the crowd and spoke in the ringmaster's voice. "Do not run." Every performer froze mid-motion. The real ringmaster's eyes widened in horror. "No!" But the command had already landed. The crowd went silent again, bodies held in perfect stillness, except for me. And I realized something horrifying. It wasn't speaking to them. It was testing control, testing influence. The imitation turned its head back toward me. Its eyes, wrong, glassy, too bright, seemed to ripple like liquid. Then it said something no rule had ever prepared us for. "Come see what waits in the mirrors." My breath hitched. Marla cried, "No, Alden, don't listen." But the imitation lifted its hand. The air around me tightened, and something grabbed my ankle from below. Not a hand, not a claw, something smooth, cold, and reflective, like a surface that shouldn't exist outside the hall of mirrors. I looked down and saw my own reflection pulling me under the ground. The ground swallowed my ankle like water snapping shut around a sinking stone. Except it wasn't water. It was smooth, hard, reflective, cold enough to numb my skin instantly. The sensation wasn't natural. It wasn't pulling me with force. It was matching the movement of my own struggling, like the reflection beneath me had simply decided it was time to stand where I was standing, and replace me in the process. I screamed and threw myself backward. Jonas lunged, grabbing my arms and yanking with everything he had. For a moment it worked. I rose an inch. Then the reflection's grip tightened, and I felt the horrifying pressure of my own hand around my own ankle from inside the ground, as if my double were anchored deeper than I could ever hope to be. Marla dropped to her knees and grabbed my other leg, pulling so hard her nails tore through my pants. "Don't let go!" she shrieked. The crowd broke into chaos behind us. Clowns scattering, acrobats tripping over rigging, performers screaming as both ringmasters moved toward each other in synchronized, unnatural steps. But all I could see was the silvery surface rippling around my leg, the shifting reflection below it. My own face staring up at me, blank, emotionless, as if I weren't the one who belonged up here anymore. "Jonas!" I grunted. "Pull!" He braced his boots against a crate and heaved. Pain shot through my ankle so sharply it made me gasp. The reflection trembled, distorting, as though the mirror-like surface was struggling to decide which version of me to keep. Then the imitation ringmaster spoke, voice calm and steady. "He's already chosen." The surface tightened around my leg like a vice. Marla screamed, "Shut up! Shut up!" And then, shockingly, the real ringmaster cut across the chaos. "Release him!" It was the first time I'd ever heard fear in Dr. Vale's voice. He stepped toward the imitation, his coat swirling behind him like a living shadow. "He is not for you," he hissed. The mimic tilted its head, curious like a bird. Then it raised one finger and traced a slow arc in the air. The ground beneath me rippled again, wider this time. And suddenly, I wasn't the only one sinking. Marla shrieked as a thin reflective line split open beneath her knees, a shimmer like moonlight forming into a hand that reached for her wrist. Jonas cursed and hauled harder on me, face contorted with effort. The ringmaster snapped, "Alden, look at me." I forced my eyes upward. "You need to reject it," he said sharply. "Do not accept the reflection. Do not mirror its movements. Fight it." "I am fighting it," I yelled. "No," he said. "You're responding to it. Don't imitate it. The mirror only has power if you play its game." My mind reeled. The reflection below me tightened its grip the moment my panic flared. It copied the tension in my body, reacted to it, like it was using my own responses to anchor itself more firmly. "Go slack," Marla shouted suddenly. Jonas's eyes widened. "She's right. Alden, go limp." I didn't know if it would work, but I didn't have a better choice. I sucked in a shaky breath, forced every muscle in my body to relax, every instinct to flee to shut down. My legs, my arms, my core, all of it went slack. The reflection faltered. It didn't know how to mimic stillness. Its grip loosened just enough. Jonas roared and yanked with everything he had. My leg tore free, sending all three of us crashing backward into the dirt. The reflective surface sealed shut in an instant, flattening back into normal earth as if nothing had happened. I scrambled away on my hands, gasping, staring at the ground where, seconds earlier, my reflection had tried to pull me into another world. Marla crawled to me, sobbing with relief. Jonas slumped beside us, panting like he'd run a marathon. But we didn't get a single second to recover, because the imitation ringmaster had turned its full attention on me. And so had the real one. The mimic's smile widened impossibly. The real ringmaster's face twisted with raw alarm. "Get away from him," Dr. Vale snapped to the mimic. A performer whispered from the crowd. "Which one do we follow?" Another voice trembled. "Which one is real?" The imitation stepped forward. In perfect synchronization, the real one stepped backward. The crowd gasped. They backed away, terrified. And that's when I realized only one of them was obeying the rules. Rule 3. If you see the ringmaster's silhouette in more than one place at the same time, evacuate immediately. But the real ringmaster wasn't evacuating. He was watching, strategizing, afraid. The imitation, meanwhile, simply existed, calm, confident, patient, as though it was the one this rule had been written for. The mimic reached out one long hand. "Alden," it said softly, "come back to the mirrors." "No!" the real ringmaster snapped. "You have no claim on him." The mimic slowly tilted its head. "You don't understand. I made the claim at dawn. My blood ran cold. Dawn. The tingling in my hands when I woke up. The fog moving the wrong direction. The mirrors arranged in a circle. The ringmaster smiling when I told him about them. He knew. He knew something had marked me. He hadn't stopped it." Marla whispered, voice cracking. "Alden, he set you up." The ringmaster's eyes flicked toward her. Just for an instant. But it was enough. That single look. That flash of guilt. Jonas spat. "You knew this was coming. You knew he was in danger." Dr. Vale didn't deny it. He only said, "There was no stopping it." And the imitation ringmaster laughed. A soft, rippling sound that made my teeth ache. The fog behind it surged forward, swirling at its back like a living cloak. And then, with a single step, the mimic closed the distance between us in a blur. Marla screamed. Jonas shoved me aside. And the imitation ringmaster reached for my chest. Not to grab me, to push me, straight toward the entrance of the Hall of Mirrors. The tent flap was impossibly far from where we stood. But the moment his hand touched me, the world bent, and I fell forward into blackness lined with reflections. Not one reflection, thousands, all of them me, but not all of them alive. I didn't hit the ground. I didn't even feel myself landing. One moment I was falling through the warped space outside the tent, and the next I was standing upright, knees locked, breath caught in my throat. My surroundings snapped into place like a camera iris closing, and I stumbled forward, disoriented. The air here was colder, sharper, like breathing in metal filings. The Hall of Mirrors, but not the one I knew. The tent was gone. The dusty wooden floor was gone. Instead, I stood on polished black tile that reflected my shoes like the surface of a lake at night. The mirrors rose around me in a perfect circle, towering higher than any tent ceiling, curving inward like the walls of a glass cathedral. Every surface gleamed, but none reflected light correctly. Some were too slow, others too fast. Some returned my movements before I made them. Some didn't reflect me at all. I swallowed hard. "Hello!" My voice didn't echo, which scared me more than if it had roared back at me 1,000-fold. Sound was absorbed here, eaten. One of the reflections blinked. My body stiffened. I hadn't blinked. Slowly, cautiously, I stepped backward. My soles squeaked on the impossibly smooth floor. The reflection kept staring. Eyes unblinking, posture rigid, face almost mine but off, like someone had sculpted me from memory but forgotten one crucial detail. A whisper drifted through the hall. "Alden." I spun toward the sound, heart slamming against my ribs. The voice wasn't Dr. Vale's. It wasn't the imitation's either. It was mine. From behind the mirror, I stepped closer because fear makes you stupid, and placed my hand against the cold glass. The reflection mirrored my movements at first, then stopped. My hand stayed pressed to the mirror, but the reflection's hand lowered slowly, deliberately, slipping out of sync with me. My breath hitched. "No!" The reflection smiled. I staggered back, pulse hammering. The smile followed but grew wider in the glass than my muscles would ever allow. The skin around its lips stretched too far, too thin. Another whisper answered it from another mirror. Then another, and another. Within seconds, every reflection around me had turned toward me independently, like a crowd watching a spectacle. Some tilted their heads too far, necks bending with soft cracks. Some pressed their palms against the wrong side of the frame. Some smiled, some frowned, some watched with hollow stillness. And one, closest to me, stepped forward. The mirror rippled like water around its foot. I backed away instantly, hands raised as if that would help. Stay back, don't. The reflection stepped through. Fully. It emerged from the mirror like someone climbing through a curtain. The skin was a shade paler than mine. Its hair looked damp, clinging to its forehead. His breathing was slow, shallow, like it had just learned how to do it. We stared at each other. Who are you? I whispered. It tilted its head in a way my neck could never manage. You, it said, but the voice was half a beat behind the movement of its mouth. But finished. I didn't understand. Finished with what? It blinked those two still eyes. Becoming. I took another step back, but I hit something. Something soft. Fear surged up my spine. Slowly, too slowly, I turned. Behind me stood another version of myself. Then another to my right. Then three more emerging from the mirrors like marionettes dropping from strings. Their movements weren't synchronized. They shuffled, tilted, corrected, trembling with half-formed autonomy. They weren't creatures wearing my face. They were drafts, unfinished copies, attempts at being me. My chest tightened. I'm not staying here. I'm not. The closest copy moved so fast the air cracked. It grabbed my wrist. Cold fingers, stronger than mine by far. His grip tightened until my bones felt like they might snap. I yelled and tried to jerk away, but its other hand rose to my face. Slow, almost tender. It pressed its thumb beneath my eye, like it was checking the softness of the socket. No, I rasped. No, don't. Another version approached, touching my shoulder with eerie curiosity. One crouched at my feet, pressing its palm against my ankle as if testing the weight of me. A third sniffed the air near my ear like an animal smelling prey. Their whispers overlapped. Almost. Not right. Missing. Or extra. Unfinished. The copy holding my wrist leaned close until its forehead nearly touched mine. We were supposed to trade, it whispered. But you ran. A shiver shot through me. Trade. Its expression didn't change. One of us for one of you. That was the rule he made. Who? I demanded, voice cracking. The imitation? Or the real ringmaster? The copy froze. All the others froze too. Then, every head turned in perfect unison toward the far end of the hall. A ripple cut through the air. Footsteps. Real, confident footsteps. Not mine. Not theirs. Dr. Silas Vale emerged from the darkness between the mirrors. The real one. His burgundy coat looked darker in this place, almost black. His face was pale but set in a cold, controlled expression I'd never seen before. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, the imitation followed. Both ringmasters stepped into the hall of mirrors without being reflected at all. The mirrors ignored them entirely, as if they weren't meant to be seen in this world. My copies shrank back instantly, hissing like frightened animals. They retreated into their mirrors, into the shadows, into angles that shouldn't exist. The real ringmaster stopped several feet away from me. His voice was soft. Alden, you weren't meant to enter this place alive. My breath froze. What does that mean? The imitation stepped beside him, smiling that horrible stretched smile. It means, the mimic said gently, you're the last thing we need to finish the trade. A tremor rippled under my feet. The mirrors behind me lit up, as dozens of my reflections pressed their hands against the glass, ready to pull me in. All at once, the mirrors surrounding me pulsed, soft, rhythmic thuds that vibrated through the floor, matching a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The reflections pressed against the glass, their palms flattening, their faces distorting with hunger and longing and something colder than intent. My lungs felt too small, like the air in this place wasn't made for breathing. Dr. Vale stepped closer, each footfall impossibly loud. The imitation ringmaster moved with him, matching pace perfectly, like two shadows attached to one body. They stopped only when they were an arm's length away. My reflections quieted the moment the ringmasters approached, lowering their hands, bowing their heads as if in reverence. It was the only time I'd ever seen my own face submit. Alden, the real ringmaster said softly, this is not a punishment. The imitation's smile widened. It is a completion. My heart hammered so violently I felt it in my fingertips. A completion of what? The contract, Vale said. I didn't sign a contract like this. You didn't read it correctly, the imitation whispered. Vale turned sharply. Enough. The imitation smiled, pleased. Vale looked back to me. This circus was founded long before I became its caretaker. This magic, its survival, depends on balance. For every season of safe passage, the mirrors claim one reflection. One version of a person who has lived within the circus long enough for the hall to study them. I shook my head, disbelief warring with terror. I've only been here 7 months. Vale nodded faintly. Just long enough. One of the reflections let out a soft, broken sound, somewhere between a sob and a sigh. Another pressed its forehead to the glass. Vale watched them with weary resignation. They are incomplete. They need wholeness. They need identity. A self. And that means taking mine? I tried to back up, but the floor behind me flickered, turning reflective for a split second. The imitation leaned forward, eyes glassy. You were chosen at dawn. Vale added. You woke when the fog shifted, didn't you? You felt the pull. I swallowed. I thought it was just nerves. No, Vale murmured. You were being mirrored. The pieces clicked violently in my head. The mirrors arranged in a circle. The tingling under my skin. The girl's message. The mimic appearing again and again. This wasn't random. It was preparation. A quiet tightening of a noose I hadn't realized I was wearing. I took a shaky breath. And if I refuse? The imitation laughed. A soft, pitying sound. You don't refuse a mirror. Vale didn't contradict it. Behind me, several reflections stepped closer to their glass, eager, fingers splayed as if reaching through. Vale continued, voice steady but trembling at the edges. Most people never know they were chosen. The mirror simply takes them. You are unusual. You resisted. You reacted. You survived. The imitation added. A pleasant surprise. Vale's gaze softened, almost sorrowful. That is why they want you even more. I shook my head, heart pounding. What about everyone else out there? Marla? Jonas? The performers? Are they all part of this? Protected, Vale said simply. By tradition. By necessity. And me, he exhaled. The circus always takes one. Anger surged hot under my fear. You let this happen. Vale didn't look away. I tried to choose someone else. That knocked the wind out of me. The imitation smiled with all its teeth. But the mirrors chose you first. Vale's jaw tightened. I didn't want this. Liar, the imitation whispered. They stared at each other, the air taut. Then the imitation turned to the reflections behind me. He is ready. Every mirror brightened at once, the surfaces shimmering like water catching moonlight. My copies leaned forward in anticipation, some whispering, some trembling. The floor beneath me rippled. I staggered, nearly losing balance. A pale hand, my hand, but not mine, pushed against the surface, rising like a drowning body reaching for air. No, no. I backed up, but another hand emerged behind me. Then another, pushing through the dark floor as if the tile were nothing but liquid glass. I looked to Vale, desperation clawing up my throat. Stop this. He took a small step forward, but the imitation barred him with an outstretched arm. You gave them your word, the mimic said evenly. A ringmaster does not break a promise. Vale's face twisted with something like grief. He lowered his head, and that was it. That was all the resistance he was willing to offer. The reflections surged, spilling upward like vines made of cold fingers. They wrapped around my ankles, my calves, my wrists. They were gentle at first, too gentle, like they were handling something fragile. Then they pulled. I screamed. Not because of pain, there wasn't any, but because of the unnatural sensation of being rewritten, piece by piece, as though the air itself were trying to decide where I belonged. Vale winced but did not intervene. The imitation stepped beside him, voice almost soothing. Don't fight it. The mirrors keep what they choose. I thrashed, twisting, trying to tear myself from the grasping reflections. One copy pressed its face against the glass, watching me with longing so intense it hurt to look at. Another mouthed words silently. Almost, Vale, I shouted. Silas, please. He lifted his eyes, and for a moment the mask cracked. He saw me, not as a sacrifice or a balance, but as the man who had fixed his tents, who had carried his ropes, who had kept his circus running. Alden, he whispered, breaking only for a heartbeat. I am sorry, but sorry doesn't break a rule. And the rules here were older than him. The reflections yanked hard. The shock knocked air from my lungs. My feet slid across the floor as the black tile beneath me softened again into liquid glass, swallowing my heels, then my ankles. Marla and Jonas's faces flashed in my mind, screaming my name, pulling me free from that first reflective grip. That moment felt like another lifetime. There were no helping hands here, only mine reaching from the wrong side. I clawed at the smooth floor. I'm not going. The imitation leaned close, its lips brushing the shell of my ear. Oh, it whispered sweetly. Yes, you are. My legs vanished beneath the surface. Then my hips, then my chest. The mirrors roared with silent joy. I gasped and went under, into the dark, into the glass, into them. There was no impact when I went under, no splash, no crack, no lurch. 1 second I was being dragged into the liquid black mirror floor, and the next I was drifting through a void that felt impossibly thin and unbearably vast at the same time. It was like floating inside a breath someone hadn't finished taking. Cold pressed against every inch of my skin, not freezing but hollow, as if the air itself were made from the absence of warmth. I tried to scream, but sound didn't exist here. Or maybe it did, but it had nowhere to go. The darkness shifted around me, rippling like ink stirred by an unseen hand. Shapes drifted through it, outlines of faces, hands, silhouettes of bodies that resembled mine but never fully formed. They flickered in and out of existence, each one almost close enough to touch, almost solid, almost real, almost me. Something brushed my shoulder, light as breath. I flinched and spun, but the movement felt delayed, like my body was lagging behind my mind by a fraction of a second. A face hovered inches away. My face, but pale, stretched at the edges, its eyes too reflective. It mouthed something silently. Then its jaw unhinged wider than it should have, and it dissolved into mist. Panic clawed up my throat. I kicked downward, upward, sideways. Every direction felt both the same and different, like moving through a maze drawn on smoke. The dark resisted me one moment and pulled me the next, guiding me deeper despite my frantic attempts to break free. Then the whispers began. Soft, layered, countless, at first incoherent, then stretching into words I recognized. Not from strangers, from me. Almost, almost, almost. My chest constricted. The reflections weren't speaking to me. They were speaking about me, wanting me, needing me. A pale shape materialized in front of me again. But this one didn't dissolve. This one solidified, rising out of the dark like a figure stepping forward on a stage. It had my face, my posture, my breath. But when it blinked, the eyelids closed horizontally, not vertically. It smiled, sorrowful, hopeful, desperate. You'll make it easier, it whispered. My mouth was dry. Make what easier? Becoming. I tried to back away, but something seized my ankle, a grip familiar and wrong at the same time. Another copy was pulling me downward, its fingers digging into my skin with craving hunger. No, no, let go. The first copy reached out, placing its palm gently to my cheek. Cold electricity jolted through me. The touch didn't hurt, but it unspooled something inside me, as if it were peeling away a layer of my thoughts, memories, self. We only need one, it murmured. One finished self, one real voice. The others will fade. Balance. I shook my head violently, tearing away from its hand. I'm not letting you take me. The copy tilted its head. But you already began. At dawn. The moment the words left its mouth, something clicked behind my eyes. A memory, subtle but chilling. When I woke, for a fraction of a second, I couldn't remember if I was lying on the bunk or standing beside it. Like my body needed an extra moment to catch up. Like something else had woken first. The dark around me trembled as dozens of half-formed versions surged closer, their faces stretching with pleading expressions. Complete us. Finish. Be us. Be me. I thrashed wildly, but the void thickened, growing heavy, sticky, pulling. The pressure built around my head until I thought my skull might crack. My vision blurred at the edges, distorting into kaleidoscopic reflections of myself layered over and over. Then, a voice cut through the void. A real voice. Human. Alden. Silas Vale. My breath caught. I twisted toward the sound, and the mirrors of the void cracked like eggshells splintering under pressure. Light cut through the blackness, thin, jagged beams like spotlights piercing smoke. Alden, follow my voice. Vale shouted again, the desperation unmistakable. The imitation ringmaster's voice followed, distorted. Leave him, he is claimed. The void shuddered violently. The reflections that clung to me recoiled, hissing, retreating into the dark. The air, or whatever served as air here, vibrated with tension like cloth tearing under strain. A rift opened ahead of me, a vertical slash of blinding white. Silas Vale's silhouette stood on the other side, arm reaching through. Take my hand, he commanded. I didn't trust him, but I trusted the darkness less. I lunged toward the rift. Hands, too many hands, lunged after me, grabbing my arms, chest, throat. My copies screamed soundlessly, their faces twisted in desperation. Stay. Stay with us. Don't leave. You belong. I ripped free, muscles burning, fingers scraping across smooth nothing until I grabbed Silas's wrist, and he pulled. The world tore. The void shrieked. A deafening crack echoed like a mirror shattering across the universe, and suddenly I was falling forward onto solid ground, gravel scraping my palms, lungs dragging in real, cold air. The world around me was spinning, tense, fog, lanterns, voices shouting. Night had fallen. I'd been gone longer than I thought. Silas collapsed beside me, breathing hard. His coat was torn at the sleeve, and something dark, ink, not blood, dripped from his fingertips. Before I could speak, he grabbed my shirt and pulled me close, his voice raw. Run. My throat tightened. What? He looked around us, eyes wide, terrified for the first time. They're coming. The mirrors want what they were promised. You broke the contract. They won't stop. The ground trembled. Every reflective surface in the entire camp, lantern glass, puddles, metal poles, began to ripple. Silas shoved me toward the treeline. Alden, go. I stumbled, turned, and behind me, dozens of my reflections stepped out of the mirrors. Complete now, whole, finished, and smiling. I ran into the woods, blindly, breath tearing out of me, branches whipping my arms, feet pounding dirt. Behind me, the reflections followed, silent, relentless, perfect versions of me. And somewhere deeper in the forest, a voice whispered from every mirror surface the moon touched. Alden, the trade isn't over.